You're listening to The Eclectic. On a February night in 1880, snow drifted down over the farms of Biddulph Township, Ontario. The sky was low, the fields were hard and white, and the only light came from kitchen lamps and the faint glow of barn lanterns. Sometime after midnight, a different light appeared. Along a rough concession road called the Roman Line, a dull orange flicker began to glow against the clouds. At first, it might have looked like a lantern carried through the fields, but it grew. It spread. Soon, anyone glancing from a bedroom window could see the unmistakable pulse of fire. By the time neighbours struggled into boots and heavy coats and pushed their way out into the cold, the Donnelly farmhouse was a burning skeleton. Inside, under charred beams and collapsed roof, were the bodies of James and Joanna Donnelly, their son Thomas, and their young niece Bridget. And this was not the only violence of that night. A few kilometres away at a place called Wayland's Corners, another son, John Donnelly, lay dead in the snow outside his brother's home. He had opened the door to see what was happening. He never had the chance to close it again. None of these people were killed by strangers. They were killed by men who knew exactly who lived in that house. Men who knew the bedrooms, the layout, the family. Men who had seen them in church, or shared tools, or passed them on the road. Men who were their neighbours. This is The Eclectic, and today we're travelling back to the 19th century Ontario, to the Roman Line, and to the story of the Black Donnellys, an Irish immigrant family whose long and bitter feud with their community ended in one of the most notorious vigilante massacres in Canadian history. It's a story about land and power, about reputation and fear, and about what happens when ordinary people decide that the law isn't enough and that justice belongs in their own hands. Our story begins not in Canada, but across the Atlantic, in a country where the ground itself was already soaked in history and resentment. In Ireland. Picture Ireland in the early 19th century. The landscape is beautiful, but for many people it's a place of hunger and pressure. Land is scarce, rents are high. The line between survival and disaster is thin. Beneath the surface, there are deep fractures. Catholic and Protestant, landlord and tenant, old grievances passed down like family heirlooms. James Donnelly and Joanna McGee grow up in this world. They are Irish Catholics, part of a population that has lived with discrimination, legal limits on their rights, and the constant fear of eviction. For people like them, land is everything. The right to put a spade in your own soil, to raise crops and animals on earth that is truly yours. That's not just a dream. It's a form of dignity. When famine and hardship push wave after wave of Irish people to leave, James and Joanna are among them. In the 1840s, they join the exodus heading west across the Atlantic to a place they hope will offer more opportunity. British North America, what we now call Canada. They don't arrive in Canada as wealthy colonists with trunks of silver and deeds to large estates. They arrive poor. The area they end up in, Biddulph Township, northwest of London, Ontario, is not a gentle landscape. It's largely bush, trees, swampy patches, rocks. Winters are long and hard. A farm is not something you buy and enjoy. It's something you carve, painfully, out of the wilderness. Along a rough road that will later become known as the Roman Line, James Donnelly finds a piece of land. There's a problem, though. He doesn't have the legal right to it. James begins as a squatter. He chooses a lot that isn't properly settled, and he takes a gamble. If he clears it, improves it, makes something of it, maybe he can sort out the paperwork later. It's not a unique strategy. A lot of poor settlers play similar games with the survey lines, but from the beginning, his relationship to the land is complicated. He builds a rough house, clears trees, fights roots out of the soil. The work is brutal, but it's a path from nothing to something. Around him, the community is taking shape. Other Irish families arrive. Some are Catholic, like the Donnellys. Others are Protestant. They bring their accents, their prayers, their memories of home. They also bring their grudges. The road where the Donnellys settle will be called the Roman Line because of the number of Irish Catholics, Romans, who live along it. Just off that road are other farms, other families, many Protestant who look at the Roman settlers with a mix of suspicion and resentment. It's important to say this clearly from the beginning. This is a community living close to the edge. There is poverty, there is competition, there is old world sectarianism, and there is a family, James and Joanna, and soon their children, who are not inclined to back down from a fight. The Donnellys have a large family. Over time, they raise a brood of mostly boys, tough and loud and used to hard work. The exact count of children varies a little between sources, but we know there are several sons: James Jr., William, John, Patrick, Michael, Robert, Thomas, and there is also a daughter, Jenny. Life on the Roman line is not polite. Disputes over fences, animals wandering onto the wrong field, debts and drunken insults are common. Barn raisings and bees, community work days where neighbours help each other build or harvest are as much about social bonding as about labour. They can also be flashpoints of tension. The Donnellys, well, they gain a reputation early on for being quick with their fists and unwilling to be pushed around. Some of the stories told about them will later be exaggerated, but there is enough truth there to stick. At some point, neighbours start referring to them as the Black Donnellys. The nickname has several possible meanings. Some say it's about their dark hair or about the black clothes they often wear. Others insist it reflects darker things, a tendency towards violence, a certain heaviness of mood. Whatever its origins, Black Donnellys becomes a label, a way of marking them out as different, dangerous. And once a name like that takes hold, it's quite hard to shake off. By the mid-1850s, James Donnelly has managed to turn his squat into something more secure. The family is not rich, but they are established. They have something to lose. They also have something else: enemies. The stage is set. We have a poor but determined Irish Catholic family, shaped by hardship, living on land they fought to hold. We have a community divided by religion, origin, and class. We have a reputation, already forming, of the Donnellys as a rough family who give as good as they get. All that's missing is the event that will put a permanent stain on their name. That event arrives in the summer of 1857. It's June 27th, 1857. A neighbour is raising a barn, and like all barn raisings in the area, it's a community affair. Men gather to work on the frame and the heavy lifting. Women help with food. There's talk, laughter, and inevitably, alcohol. James Donnelly and a man named Patrick Farrell are both there. The two men have a history. They've clashed before, mostly over land. Who has the right to which lot? Who is encroaching on whose claims? In a world where property means survival, arguments about land are not just disputes. They are personal. As the day goes on and the drink flows, the tension between James and Farrell rises. Accounts differ on who starts the fight, who threw the first insult, or who made the first move, but everyone does agree on one thing. By the end of it, Patrick Farrell has taken a blow to the head. Within a couple of days, he is dead. The authorities move quickly. A man has been killed. Witnesses say James Donnelly struck him. James understands exactly how serious this is. Before he can be arrested, he disappears. For almost 2 years, he is a fugitive. He doesn't flee to another country. He moves through the local area, helped by friends and sympathisers. It's a cat-and-mouse existence, living in the shadows of a community that knows him well. Eventually, though, hiding does become impossible for him. James Donnelly surrenders. He is tried for the killing of Patrick Farrell. The court finds him guilty. The sentence is death. For Joanna, This is not just the loss of a husband. It is the destruction of everything they've built. A widow with many children and a partly developed farm faces a near impossible future. But Joanna, she is as stubborn as James, and she begins a campaign for mercy. She petitions, she argues, she pleads, and against all the odds, she succeeds. The authorities commute James Donnelly's sentence from hanging to 7 years in Kingston Penitentiary. It is an extraordinary reprieve. It is also a branding. When James finally returns to the Roman line in 1865, he comes back as a man publicly known to have killed another man. Whether you call it murder or manslaughter, the details hardly matter to the gossip on the road. In the minds of many neighbours, the Donnellys are now officially dangerous. That label sticks to the whole family. From this point on, whenever something goes wrong, a barn burns, a man is beaten, a piece of equipment is sabotaged, people are quick to ask, was it the Donnellys? Sometimes that suspicion is justified. The Donnelly boys are not gentle. They drink, they fight, they settle scores with fists and sometimes worse. But there's also a feedback loop at work. The more they are suspected and accused, the more they see the community as hostile. And the more the community sees them as hostile, the more it is ready to believe the worst. Meanwhile, the world around them is changing. The Grand Trunk Railway has come up through the region. Towns like Lucan are growing. Farmers and travellers need to get from village to village, from farm to station, from station to town. That movement of people, parcels, mail, needs transport. There is money to be made in stagecoaches. The Donnellys, always looking for a way to secure their future, get involved in the stage business. They run horses and wagons on certain routes, but they are not alone. Other families, including some who already dislike the Donnellys, are also in the game. The competition is fierce. On bad roads, accidents are common, but some accidents look oddly convenient. A competitor's coach wheel comes off at just the wrong turn. A horse goes lame after being mysteriously injured in the night. A wagon is found hacked or burned. In this world, you don't just undercut your rivals with prices. You might also try to scare them off a route, to make their business too costly or too dangerous. Again, we run into the same problem. Evidence is thin, but suspicion is thick. Many people believe that the Donnellys are behind some of these incidents. Others think their rivals are no better. There are lawsuits, civil actions over damages, countersuits, now and then criminal charges. Most of the time, the cases are messy and inconclusive. But every time a judge finds that the Donnellys owe money for an incident, their reputation darkens. Every time a criminal case against them fails, their enemies become more convinced that the law does not work. You can imagine the stories being told in farmhouse kitchens along the Roman line. Stories of the night the horses were maimed. Stories of threats muttered in taverns. Stories of James Donnelly and his sons standing their ground and promising revenge. By the mid-1870s, the Donnelly family and their community have become locked into a pattern. There are real injuries and real crimes. There is also exaggeration, myth-making, and a growing sense among some neighbours that the Donnellys are beyond the reach of normal justice. It's in this atmosphere that a new idea begins. If the courts cannot, or will not, deal with the Donnellys, maybe the community must. When people feel unsafe and unheard, they look for ways to take control. In the Biddulph township, that impulse takes the shape of a group calling itself the Peace Society. On paper, the Biddulph Peace Society is a respectable idea. Law-abiding citizens coming together to discourage crime, support each other and push the authorities to act when necessary. It sounds like a neighbourhood watch. Underneath, it is also something else. Many of the men most active in the Peace Society have long-running grievances with the Donnelly family. They're stagecoach competitors, neighbours with land disputes, or people who say they've been threatened or attacked. To them, peace increasingly means a community without the Donnellys. As the 1870s wear on, fires continue to break out across the township, barns burn, hay and feed go up in smoke, families lose months of labour in a single night. These are catastrophes, not minor inconveniences. Sometimes the cause is carelessness, sometimes it's lightning, but in the rumours that race along the concession roads, there is usually another explanation: revenge. Once again, the finger is pointed, almost by reflex, at the Donnellys. A smaller, harder group emerges from within the Peace Society. They're less interested in petitions and more interested in results. They begin to think of themselves as a vigilante group, people who will, if necessary, act where the law has failed. Among them is a man already familiar to the Donnelly family, Constable James Carroll. Carroll has clashed with the Donnellys before. He's been involved in attempts to bring charges against them. Some accounts suggest that these cases have embarrassed him, either by failing or by being seen as weak. Whatever the exact details, there is bad blood. It's a dangerous combination: personal grievance, perceived professional humiliation, and a community chorus insisting that something must be done. We see this pattern in many places and times. People begin by talking about order, about safety, about good people, needing to stand together. It doesn't sound like a call to violence, but step by step, the language shifts. We're just watching them. We're just sending a message. We're just making sure they can't hurt anyone else. And then at some point, without anyone saying it out loud, just stops being a limit and becomes an excuse. The event that brings all this to head is another fire. In early 1880, the barn of a man named Patrick Ryder burns down. For Ryder, this is a devastating loss. Barns are not just buildings, they're the centre of a farm's operations. Losing one means losing animals, equipment, food. It means debt and uncertainty. Almost immediately, people blame the Donnellys. Once again, proof is thin. Once again, history fills in the gaps. The Donnellys have feuded with various neighbours. They've been suspected in other cases. They have enemies. That's enough for many people to be sure, in their own minds, that they're guilty. This time, the reaction is more formal. Members of the Donnelly family are charged in connection with the Ryder fire. A trial is scheduled for February the 4th in Granton, a nearby village. For James Donnelly, now an older man, this is not just another court date. It's a chance to fight back properly. He prepares not only to defend his sons, but to bring countercharges. He plans to expose in open court the activities of some of the very men behind the Peace Society and the emerging Vigilante Committee. Sworn testimony could drag secrets into the light. It could show that threats and intimidation haven't all come from one direction. For the men in the Vigilante Committee, this is a problem. If James walks into that courtroom and starts naming names, the story the community telling itself, that decent citizens are just trying to defend themselves against a violent family, might start to crack. So, in the days before the trial, talk turns darker. On the evening of February the 3rd, 1880, a group of men meet at a small schoolhouse in an area known as Cedar Swamp. It's winter. The sky is low. That little building, lit from inside, must have looked like any other community meeting. Inside, the conversation is far from ordinary. We don't have a full, verbatim record of what's said, but we know the general outline. The Donnellys, the Ryder barn fire, the coming trial, and what should be done. Among the men present are members from the Vigilante Committee, and, according to later testimony, Constable James Carroll. They talk about evidence. They talk about the family's past, and at some point, they decide that the courts will not do enough. They decide to act. One of the most chilling details of that night is the recruitment of a young man named James Feely. James is sent to the Donnelly homestead with a simple but deadly task: to see who's there, how many people are in the house, who exactly is sleeping under that roof on that particular night. He does what he's told. He goes to the house, watches, listens, counts. Then he reports back to the men at the schoolhouse. His information will ensure that when the mob walks up to the Roman line in the dark, it will know exactly where to go and who to expect inside. By the time the lamps go out along the concession roads, the Donnellys believe they'll be going to court in the morning. Some of their neighbours have decided that they will never get there. That night, on the Roman line, the snow is not deep, but it's enough to crunch under boots. The air is so cold, it seems to scrape the inside of your nose when you breathe. The sky hangs low, reflecting the faint light from scattered farmhouses. Inside the Donnelly homestead, the day ends like any other. James and Joanna settle for the night. Their son Thomas is there. Their niece Bridget, visiting from Ireland, shares a bed with Joanna. The teenage farmhand, 15-year-old Johnny O'Connor, is staying over. He's been taken in to help with work, to have a place to sleep and eat. Another son, John Donnelly, isn't at the homestead tonight. He's at his brother William's house at Wayland's Corner, a small crossroads settlement a little distance away. The kitchen fire is banked, doors are latched. The house creaks as it settles into the cold. Somewhere, out in the dark, dogs bark lazily and then fall quiet again. Time passes. Then, along the road, shapes begin to move. A group of men walk through the night. Some wear scarves or cloth over their faces. Some carry clubs, pieces of heavy wood. Others, they have firearms. Their breath puffs in the cold air. Their boots leave a trail of prints in the snow. These are not strangers to one another. Many of them have worked side by side in fields, shared jokes, exchanged favours. Tonight, they are bound by something else, a decision made in a small schoolhouse that the law is not enough. Guided by the information from James Feely, they turn off the road and head towards the Donnelly farm. The house stands dark and quiet. Inside, the family sleeps. At some point, after 1 a.m, there is a loud, heavy pounding on the door. Imagine being wrenched from sleep by that sound. The shock, the confusion, the scramble to understand what's happening as you fumble for clothes in the cold. According to later accounts, Constable James Carroll is one of the first to enter. He announces that he is there to arrest Thomas Donnelly. It's a believable pretext. The family is expecting legal trouble. There are charges related to the Ryder barn fire. An arrest in the middle of the night is unexpected but not unimaginable. Thomas, dragged from sleep, is handcuffed. Behind Carroll, more men push into the house. This is where the line between arrest and attack disappears. From here, much of what we know comes from one terrified witness, Johnny O'Connor. When the men surge into the house, Johnny does the only thing a 15-year-old boy can think to do. He hides. He squeezes under a bed, pressed into the space between floor and frame, trying to make himself as small and silent as possible. From that hiding place, he can't see everything, but he can hear. He hears voices shouting, the scrape of boots, the thud of blows, the cries of people he's been sharing a roof with, suddenly caught in a storm of violence. James Donnelly, Pulled into the kitchen is attacked. Joanna is beaten. Thomas, who's still in irons, is struck again and again. He is effectively defenceless, hands bound, as men armed with heavy clubs bring them down on his body. Bridget, the young niece from Ireland, runs upstairs, trying to escape. She climbs to the loft, maybe thinking she can hide in the shadows or slip out a back way. Men follow. Up there, in the dimness of the upper part of the house, they corner her. She is killed, far from home, in a country that was supposed to offer a better life. All the while, Johnny lies under the bed, frozen, listening. The violence is not quick and clean. It is messy, it is personal, and it is carried out at close quarters, in a kitchen that has seen many family meals and ordinary arguments, now echoing with the sounds of murder. We cannot know every word spoken or every swing of a club, but we know that when the attackers are finished, James, Joanna, Thomas, and Bridget are all dead. The men begin to prepare the next stage. They gather bedding, furniture, anything that will burn. They pile things into piles, break wood to make kindling, and they spread material that will carry flame quickly. They set the house on fire. Flames take hold and move fast through dry timber. Smoke thickens in the rooms. Heat rises. The attackers step back out into the cold, watching as the building, home to one of the most notorious families in the township, starts to glow like a furnace. For Johnny, who is still under the bed, the situation changes from terrifying to desperate. The immediate violence has stopped, but now the house is filling with smoke. The air becomes hard to breathe. His hiding place, safe from clubs, becoming a trap. At some point, he makes a decision. He crawls out from under the bed through the thickening smoke and finds his way toward the back of the house. He searches for a way out. A door, a window, any opening into the night. He manages to escape. Barely dressed, shaken and half-choked, he plunges into the snow and starts to run, away from the blazing house, away from the men who have just turned it into a funeral pyre, towards neighbours he hopes will help. In many retellings, this is the moment that keeps the events of that night from being swallowed entirely by silence. A boy runs through the cold, carrying the story in his head. Back at the burning homestead, the mob is already thinking about its next move. The plan, if we can call it that, is not just to destroy the Donnelly home, it is to eliminate the Donnelly presence. The men turn back to the road and head toward another destination. Wayland's Corners, where William Donnelly lives and where John Donnelly is staying that night. Wayland's Corners is not far, just long enough for the men to catch their breath, to adjust their scarves and hoods, and to tighten their grip on weapons. When they arrive, they surround William's house. Inside, the people in that home are asleep. They may or may not have seen the glow on the horizon from the burning homestead. They may have no idea that 4 members of their family have just been killed. Outside, the men with clubs and guns prepare a trick. They start shouting, "Fire!" In a rural community, especially in winter, fire is a shared danger. If you think a neighbour's barn or house is burning, you don't stay in bed. You get up, you look. You may rush out to help. Hearing the cries, someone inside moves towards the door. That someone is John Donnelly. He opens the door, perhaps expecting to see flames, or at least light. Instead, he steps into the line of fire. A shot rings out. John Donnelly falls dead in the snow outside his brother's house. Inside, William, his wife Nora, and others see or hear the killing. They're faced with a terrible clarity. Whatever is happening out there is aimed at them, at their family. They do not open the door again. The mob, having killed John and obliterated the homestead, has done what it came to do. It melts back into the night. By the time the first streaks of dawn appear, the road along the Roman line is marked by trails of footprints and the blackened remains of a house. 5 members of the Donnelly family are dead. Their killers are already back in their own beds, in their own kitchens, among their own families. In the morning, the community will wake to a crime so shocking that even those who had long hated the Donnellys will struggle to find words. Some will call it justice. Others will call it murder. Everyone will know that it was done by men they recognise. By daylight, the scene at the Donnelly homestead is almost indescribable. The house is a ruin of charred beams and smoking debris. The bodies inside are burned broken. Difficult to identify at first glance. Neighbours gather, some in genuine shock, others perhaps hiding a knowledge they will never confess. News travels quickly. Local officials arrive, coroners, constables from outside the immediate area. Inquests are opened almost immediately. The question they must answer is simple in form and impossible in practice. Who did this? Almost at once, one key name emerges in witness accounts: Johnny O'Connor. Johnny tells his story. Being woken in the night, the rush of men into the house, the sounds of the attack from under the bed, the names and voices he believes he recognised. His testimony is not perfect. No eyewitness account in trauma ever is. But it is detailed, and it points to specific men. Among them is Constable James Carroll. For the authorities, this is explosive. They're not dealing with a lone killer or a small group of outlaws. They are dealing with what appears to be a coordinated vigilante action involving respectable members of the community, including an officer of the law. Arrests follow. Carroll and a dozen or so other men are taken into custody and charged in connection with the murders. The legal process that unfolds over the months that follow is complex, messy, and deeply affected by local feelings. In court, the Crown's case leans heavily on Johnny. He is, in many ways, the heart of their argument. He was there. He survived. He heard and saw things from inside the house that no one else did. The defence knows this, and they target him. They question his memory. How clearly could he really see from under a bed in the dark, in a house full of smoke and chaos? They suggest that he has been influenced and that he is saying what others want him to say. They emphasise his youth, his fear, his supposed unreliability. At the same time, the defence lawyers work to put the Donnellys on trial, even in death. They catalogue fights, fires, accusations and lawsuits. They paint a picture of a family that terrorised neighbours for years. They imply that, consciously or not, witnesses and jurors should understand the context, that people were afraid, that tempers had been frayed to breaking point. The message, sometimes subtle and sometimes not, is this: you may not like what happened, but can you really blame anyone for wanting to stop the Donnellys? The first major trial ends with a hung jury. The jurors cannot reach a unanimous decision on guilt. The case, already complicated, becomes even more politically sensitive. A second trial, focused on Carroll alone, results in an acquittal. After that, the Crown steps back. No one else is successfully prosecuted. No one serves time for the killings. Officially, justice has taken its course. Unofficially, the message is clear. Whatever happened on the Roman line that night, the community does not have the will, or even the courage, to punish those responsible. For the surviving Donnelly family members, the massacre is both an ending and the beginning of a new kind of exile. Some leave the area, moving to other parts of Canada or to the United States. They take jobs as labourers, tradesmen, anything that allows them to put distance between themselves and the scene of their family's destruction. But the name follows them. Being a Donnelly is no longer just about belonging to a particular family from the Roman line. It's a story, a scandal, a shorthand for violence and tragedy. Strangers know the name, employers have opinions, the past clings like smoke. Even those who were not in the house that night, who did not throw a punch or light a match, bear its weight. The effects of that February night ripple outward, in other ways too. The young spy, James Feely, does not escape unscathed. His role in guiding the mob to the house becomes known. His family faces consequences, including the loss of their farm. Later accounts describe him as a man haunted by what he did and what followed. And then there is the broader community. In Lucan and Biddulph Township, the massacre becomes something people learn to step around, like a hole in the floor. Families know, privately, which ancestors rode out that night. They know who supported the vigilantes and who was horrified. But for decades, there is a kind of public silence. The story doesn't go away, it just goes underground. It takes years, decades even, before writers and researchers begin to pull it fully into the open. In the mid-20th century, books about the Black Donnellys reignite public interest. Some emphasise the family's alleged crimes, leaning into the "devil's got what they deserved" angle. Others, they're a bit more sympathetic, portraying them as victims of prejudice and scapegoating. Plays, novels, and eventually modern theatre pieces revisit the massacre, using it as a lens to talk about vigilantism, community complicity, and the ways we justify violence. In Lucan itself, a museum now preserves documents, artefacts, and interpretations related to the case. Visitors can walk through exhibits that tell the story from multiple angles. The immigrant family trying to build a life, the frightened neighbours, the vigilantes, the failures of the legal system. The debate continues. Were the Donnellys uniquely violent, a family that pushed its community beyond endurance? Or were they, in the end, one rough family among many, singled out because of religion, personality, and the power of rumour until their destruction felt, to some, like an act of cleansing? The answer, as with most stories we explore here on the Eclectic, lies somewhere in the uncomfortable middle. The Donnellys were not innocent saints. They fought, they threatened, they were involved in real violence. People had legitimate reasons to be wary of them. But what happened on that February night in 1880, that was not justice. It was a mob deciding that fear and anger were enough to kill by. It was ordinary men putting on masks, walking into the dark, and letting themselves become the very thing they said they were fighting. On a winter night, long ago, along a lonely road in Ontario, a community made a choice. Faced with a family they saw as dangerous, a legal system that they thought was weak, and a history of grudges stretching back years, some of its members decided that the usual rules no longer applied to them. They broke down the door, they swung clubs in a kitchen, they shot a man in his brother's doorway, and they set fire to a house with people still inside. And then they went home. Today, we talk about the Black Donnellys as legend, as a ghost story, as a cautionary tale with just enough distance to feel safe. But underneath the myth, the core is painfully simple. This is a story about what happens when we let stories about other people, about their supposed nature, their reputation, their blackness, matter more than their lives. More than a century later, we still tell the tale of the Donnellys, in books, in plays, in museums, in podcasts like this one. We argue over the details, over blame, over how much they deserved and how much they suffered. But one thing is hard to escape. On that February night, no matter what came before, the line was crossed by the people who believed they were saving their community. You've been listening to The Eclectic. If you found this story compelling, please follow, rate and share the show. It helps others discover these deep dives into the stranger corners of history. And if you have a family legend of your own, half truth, half ghost story, I'd love to hear it. Until next time, stay curious, stay questioning, and as always, stay